Señoras y señores, muy buenos días. En nombre de la Facultad de Arquitectura y Diseño de la Universidad de Portales, damos la más cordial bienvenida a la segunda jornada de Rizomas, Seminario Internacional, Transdisciplina, Innovación y Aprendizaje, actividad organizada por la Facultad de Arquitectura y Diseño, Factoría UDP y Laboratorio de Materiales y Prototipos LAM, con la colaboración de la Dirección de Desarrollo Docente y la Dirección de Investigación e Innovación de la Universidad Diego Portales. Saludamos muy especialmente a la directora de la Escuela de Arquitectura, la señora Carolina del Campo, a nuestros expositores, a las autoridades y a los académicos y académicas que nos acompañan, amigas y amigos, de quienes están presenciando este seminario vía streaming. Sean todos y todas muy bienvenidos. Rizomas, Seminario Internacional, Transdisciplina, Innovación y Aprendizaje, un espacio de reflexión colectiva que transfiera, debata y medite sobre experiencias teóricas y prácticas relacionadas con el ejercicio transdisciplinar, la innovación y el aprendizaje. Con ello, identificar las transformaciones que se requieren efectuar en los modelos de aprendizaje en función a los desafíos de nuestra era, complejos, dinámicos y emergentes. Rizomas busca incorporar la transdisciplina, innovación e investigación aplicada en la comunidad académica en su conjunto, desencapsular el debate disciplinar, detonando interacciones que permitan la formación de un ecosistema complejo a nivel universitario y crear las bases de un proceso que debiese tender a la implementación de un proyecto de innovación pedagógica transversal en la estructura de la universidad. Hoy hablaremos del método. Para dar inicio a este seminario, invito a los organizadores de este seminario, el académico de la Escuela de Arquitectura y director de Factoría, Andrés Diseño, y Nicolás Cabargas, director del Laboratorio de Materiales y Prototipos LAM y académico de la Escuela de Arquitectura.
Buenos días. Muchas gracias por asistir nuevamente a esta jornada de reflexión respecto a las materias que Rizomas plantea. Queríamos partir esta jornada que habla sobre método, haciendo una pequeña reflexión respecto a lo que entendemos por aquello. Para culturas orientales, el intelecto requiere cierta maestría, ¿no? Y la maestría, que a mi juicio es destacable respecto a cómo ellos o esas culturas ancestrales entienden el intelecto, está en una espada. Esa espada tiene que ser capaz de cortar un árbol, pero el árbol no se da cuenta. El árbol sigue, pero lo cortó. El intelecto, efectivamente, es una herramienta que nosotros tenemos los seres humanos para sobrevivir, para de algún otro modo deambular con las reglas que nos plantean el entorno a veces agresivo. El intelecto disecciona. ¿Cuál es el conflicto aquí? Es que hemos construido una sociedad, una cultura, relativamente los últimos 300 años, donde hemos dejado de lado otras cosas. No somos intelectos solamente. Somos otras cosas. No somos hígados, páncreas, pulmones, aparte. Somos seres más complejos. Y uno de los elementos que, a mi juicio, parece relevante cuando hablamos de método es dónde queda, por ejemplo, el instinto. ¿Qué espacio tiene el instinto de la ciencia? ¿Qué espacio tiene el instinto para poder construir una sociedad más justa, más equilibrada, ¿no? Y que haga sentido con, digamos, los conflictos que tenemos? Los conflictos que tenemos ya se superaron. Y ahí viene un problema. Con algo comentamos en la mañana, el orador principal que ya lo hemos presentado, conversábamos respecto a cómo manejar la complejidad que tenemos hoy día, soportado la crisis. soportado en la catástrofe eventualmente. ¿Cómo la manejamos? Aparentemente, aquí está lo complicado, nosotros como seres humanos no somos capaces. Somos capaces de cumplir una parte, pero vamos a requerir tecnología eventualmente. Nuevas tecnologías que colaboren con nosotros para justamente balancear el desquiciamiento del sistema. El sistema, no me refiero al sistema social y político, sino que justamente el ecosistema. ¿Cómo creamos métodos que puedan expedir justamente experiencias valiosas a nuestras nuevas generaciones para enfrentar esos conflictos? Para poder de algún otro modo deambular en esas aguas turbulentas. Si seguimos insistiendo en la razón como la única alternativa, vamos a diseccionar justamente la experiencia. La experiencia genera instinto. La experiencia genera otras capas que de algún otro modo no están soportadas por evidencia. La evidencia es necesaria, pero la experiencia también lo es. El conflicto, al menos lo que queremos manifestar acá, y a modo muy personal, es que los métodos de aprendizaje y los modelos de aprendizaje nos han alejado completamente de la experiencia. Nos han alejado completamente del instinto. Lo castigamos, de hecho. La invitación acá para hablar de método no es para que podamos identificar el método, sino para eventualmente, a partir de las buenas experiencias, las buenas prácticas que vamos a escuchar de todos los invitados y invitadas que tenemos, algunos elementos en común que vamos a poner en práctica de manera dinámica. ¿Eso qué quiere decir? Que esos elementos pueden ir transformándose, adaptándose a través del tiempo. Pero si no tenemos preguntas consistentes, si no tenemos de algún modo clara estos elementos que tienen que ver con justamente otras variables del juego, vamos a seguir repitiendo un poquito el mismo, o vamos a seguir golpeándonos con el mismo muro, ¿no? La invitación ahora es justamente para entender el método como un espacio flexible, adaptativo, y que pueda construir algún patrón que nos permita generar experiencias de aprendizaje profundo para las nuevas generaciones. Esa es la invitación al menos para ahora. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, bienvenidas y bienvenidos a esta segunda sesión de nuestro seminario. Como bien decía Andrés, el día de hoy nos convoca el método, y no el método como algo finito, lineal, sino como todo lo contrario, como algo que se construye, que emerge. Y en ese sentido, a mí me hace mucho sentido esa referencia a los sistemas naturales. O sea, si vemos la naturaleza, un laboratorio de exploración que tiene 3.8 billones de años, nos dice que las cosas no son estáticas, primero. Y segundo, que las cosas literalmente evolucionan, y eso hace que las cosas emerjan. En ese sentido, el método, nosotros sentimos que es algo que no es lineal, que no es algo, como dije antes, estático, sino que emerge al igual como los ecosistemas a partir de esa adaptación que tienen a las cosas que van ocurriendo. En este sentido, es imposible hacer caso omiso a la crisis climática, a la crisis social que estamos viviendo. Por ende, cómo ese método evoluciona, se mueve, se adapta, es fundamental. Por lo tanto, la discusión que hoy día proponemos a partir de este seminario es ver cómo, a partir de distintos ejemplos que vamos a ver de nuestros expositores, podemos generar una estrategia que nos permita elaborar en conjunto una metodología que no se defina como un método lineal que va a pasar de 20 años siendo lo que es, sino que una metodología que nos permita entender cómo estas cosas complejas, dinámicas, van de alguna manera moviéndose y haciendo que esto evolucione, mute y se transforme en lo que realmente necesitamos como herramienta para poder responder a los problemas de hoy. Así que muchas gracias por su asistencia y esperamos a una conversación.
Muchas gracias, Andrés y Nicolás, por esta presentación e introducción a esta segunda jornada del Seminario Rizomas. Seminario Internacional, Transdisciplina, Innovación y Aprendizaje. Y bien, para continuar, daremos inicio a nuestra presentación principal, a cargo de Sayegh, quien tendrá luego una conversación con la psicóloga educacional y directora de Desarrollo Curricular y docente de la Universidad de Portales, Isabel Ramos. Les recuerdo antes de dar la presentación a nuestro invitado, todas las preguntas que se quieran realizar serán a través del chat. Por favor. Bien, Sayegh. Invito a alguien, por favor. Profesor asociado en práctica de tecnología arquitectónica en la Escuela de Graduados de Diseño de la Universidad de Harvard y director del Laboratorio de Artefactos y Entornos Responsivos Real de la misma universidad. Sayegh es arquitecto, diseñador y educador, director de Innovación, una firma de diseño globalmente galardonada. El profesor Sayegh cofundó recientemente en la Universidad de Harvard el grupo ALIM, un equipo interdisciplinario de científicos y diseñadores de la Escuela de Graduados en Diseño de Harvard y el Instituto WISS de Ingeniería en Inspiración Biológica. Además de su trabajo de diseño, el profesor Sayegh tiene un profundo interés en las artes visuales y ha sido profesor invitado recurrente en Capitol Center de Estudios Visuales y Ambientales de Harvard, ofreciendo cursos en las áreas de medios y el entorno construido, tales como esculpir movimiento, espacios interactivos, arquitectura aumentada, arquitectura cinematográfica y entornos receptivos. Alem, bienvenido.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I will speak in English. Thank you. Thank you again. With new technology, and with technology always you have issues, but we'll manage. So the title of my talk today is "What do I do when I grow up?" So that's my title, and I'm going to walk you through my strategy for that. So when I was growing up, I wanted to become an astronaut, and I was very determined to become an astronaut. I grew up in Lebanon in the 70s and 80s. And if you know a little bit about Lebanon, it was ravaging civil war. So needless to say, my parents' idea of me becoming an astronaut was not in tune with their basic daily concerns. So I ended up, this is what I do now. Sorry to disappoint you, I did become an astronaut. So right before I came, I was teaching a class at Harvard. It's an interdisciplinary class that is taught by architects, designers, industrial designers, engineers. And we take a very large topic, and this year is about circular economy. And students that come from also very different backgrounds, they create different projects. So the projects are very diverse, anything from art installation using food waste to green alternatives to burial and cremation, to healthy foods in space. Maybe that's my, for circular economy on the moon, maybe that's the closest that I came to becoming an astronaut. and so on. So it's completely diverse. So that's what I do now. I teach at Harvard. I also have my firm in Innovación, which I do more these types of design installations that I will talk you through them in a little bit. And I will show you both how I balance my time between the lab at Harvard, which is called Responsive Environments and Artifacts Lab, and NVIDIA, my firm. So my interest lies in experience, technology, and environment, loosely framed. And of course, this is everything. You can think of it, everything is about technology, everything is about the environment. We're in an architecture school, so this is everything we do. Also the experience, we design for humans, we don't design for anybody else, but I had this different take on it. So I'm going to unpack a few of the projects and hopefully we'll have a discussion at the end. So if you think about it, there's a mental environment, the virtual environment, and the physical environment. So the mental environment is about the perception, thoughts, emotions. Virtual environment is about big data, virtual communities, avatar, and the physical environment, of course, everything we do in architecture and urban studies. So those are the three realms. And the idea of this interaction, so we can have a direct interaction between our mind to the physical environment, or we can have a mediated interaction. Or the third part, which I like to explore, is this bidirectional active interaction with the physical environment. So, fueled by rapid technological change, our neurochemistry is changing at an unprecedented rate. And so, what's real and what's virtual is getting blurred by the day. So, we constantly are on our phones. We look at our environment through our phones or through our mediated devices. And our brains are constantly getting rewired, our attention focus, values, and desires are constantly being hacked, basically, at an alarming rate. So this, I don't create any solutions for this, but I try to be playful and understanding what does this mean and how we can create opportunities using these technologies. So I'm going to, this is a sketch of depicting Plato's cave, the allegory of the cave, where it's a very famous, one of the most famous allegories. So it's basically, there are these prisoners, and they're looking at shadows that are created by these people who are controlling the puppets, and they think this is reality. But then one of them escapes, and then comes back, and then tries to tell them, okay, there's a real world out there, but nobody believes it, basically. So that's, of course, you can understand this in very different ways. But I think it's a fascinating way of understanding today's technology and how these echo chambers that we live in and how it's constantly changing our way, the way we think about everything. So, of course, this was the main inspiration of the Matrix. That might be more familiar from the allegory of the cave for some people. So, the experiments that I do through these installations about how can we view and unveil different meanings in our surrounding. So we see our environment, the physical environment, but is there other layers that we can think of by adding technology and really understanding this physical environment in different ways? So I will quote my colleague. So it says the task of design is to modify and modulate our surfaces of engagement with space to hack the world with our perception of it. It's my Stanford Twitter. And basically, these are the types of things that I do at the end in my. So there are these large installations that use technology in one way. They respond to the physical environment, but they try either to bring up a new meaning or to try to unveil a new meaning or create a new type of behavior using technology in the built environment. I'm going to walk through a few of them. So this is a a sculpture in our yard, Aura, and there's a video here. I'm going to play it.
As you step out of your freshman dorm on the way to your morning lecture, you come upon this: a monumental, pure alabaster globe perches delicately on a patch of grass. The simple structure exudes an air of serenity, but when you approach the sphere and rest your hand on its shell of polished concrete, you can sense the surface glowing, trembling gently underneath your palm, pulsating to the constant flux of energy in our yard. This is Aura, an on-campus art installation to bring to the freshman student body mindfulness about energy and resource consumption in the 17 freshman dorms of Harvard College. The main component of Aura features a hollow concrete sphere of 8 feet in diameter, securely installed on the northern section of the old yard. The sculpture is made of biodynamic cement, an innovative material that, when exposed to sunlight, can break down smog in the air. Embedded into this biodynamic cement are thousands of fiber optic threads that extend all the way to the center, from where a cluster of LEDs broadcast varying amounts and patterns of light onto the surface of the sphere. An interior network of heating oils keeps the concrete exterior slightly warm to touch.
I'll fast forward to the later photos. Sorry. I'll keep this. So basically, it's a sculpture that uses feedback loops to create understanding, to bring mindfulness to the 18 or 17 houses in our yard by interacting with it, for them to become aware of their energy consumption. So on one level, it's just a sculpture, but it's associated with a research project that creates a feedback between mindset, but also what it does, it makes this intangible or things that we forget about. So it just brings them to their, it's something that's completely on network level, let's say, on the web. So it makes it more tangible and people interact with it in the Harvard. Not going to show the whole video. This is
As you step out of your freshman dorm on the way to your morning lecture, you come upon this: a monumental, pure alabaster globe perches delicately on a patch of grass. The simple structure exudes an air of serenity. When you approach the sphere and rest your hand on its shell of polished concrete, you can sense the surface glowing, trembling gently underneath your palm, pulsating to the constant flux of energy in our yard. This is Aura, an on-campus art installation to bring to the freshman student body mindfulness about energy and resource consumption in the 17 freshman dorms of Harvard College. The main component of Aura features a hollow concrete sphere 8 feet in diameter, securely installed on the northern section of the old yard. The sculpture is made of biodynamic cement, an innovative material that, when exposed to sunlight, can break down small in the air. Embedded into this biodynamic cement are thousands of fiber optic threads that extend all the way to the center, from where a cluster of LEDs can broadcast varying amounts and patterns of light onto the surface of the sphere. An interior network of heating coils keeps the concrete exterior slightly warm to touch, and a small subwoofer sits within the shell and provides the entire sculpture with a soft vibration that mimics a gentle heartbeat. This aura sphere functions as a part of a larger research project that investigates how freshmen awareness of sustainable habits can be developed and strengthened. Freshmen can sign up with their college email or phone number and receive a quick daily survey question asking them if they have performed a simple task, such as turning off unused lights or reducing the length of showers. These responses are compiled live as they are collected, and the result is reflected in the behaviors of Aura. The less mindful the student body is of being sustainable, the dimmer the glow, and the more erratic the vibration. Now, when the spectator knows,
so it creates this aggregate understanding of the research that's going on. So it brings it. This is another project. This is in Minneapolis, and this is called Mini. And basically, this again, same idea. It visualizes the, in this case, another type of online or social networks issues. In this case, it's the anxiety caused by Twitter. So basically, it just does language analysis, and then it goes towards the agitated versus calm, but on a city scale. So it just takes but what's interesting also is people come underneath to try to give this feedback loops and try to calm this agitated cloud. And then, of course, it's mists, and so it has its behavior, but it's all, again, taking this virtual data and transforming it into this physical large-scale installation. And this is another, again, takes the same idea to a different level. And this was in New York, in Soho district. And this is a bench that we did that creates, again, gets anxiety. And this was where a lot of police violence was happening. It takes the feed from police sources, and then it creates, again, vibration and translates the vibration of the police feed into a physical type of response, basically. So you can sleep on the bench and you can feel this response with your body. So again, the whole is made out of concrete, and you see it here. It's fiber reinforced concrete, and the whole sculpture behaves as this sound apparatus by having this transducers, so the whole thing vibrates as the feed is coming. And the whole, also the sculpture is molded out of abstracted human forms, basically. So it has this very organic feel. Again, it's a reference to, again, it was about police violence and so this is another project. So I'm going to wrap up in this project soon. I'm just showing you so that you get the idea of the type of project. So this is another one in Calgary. Basically, in this case, it's an installation in an underpass that the idea of it is to create a conversation between passersby. So it's called familiar strangers, and the idea is what a familiar stranger is when it's the people that you see every day in your commute, so you know them, but you don't know their names, but you know who they are. So this is a place where a lot of people commute, and what it does is basically it lets you see on both sides of the underpass. It's a reverse mirror, so it lets you see your silhouette. Your silhouette is reflected like how other people might see you. So it's this reverse mirror. It's a simple thing. So when you're walking like this, your silhouette is approaching that way, and vice versa. And then you can see your silhouette, and other people can see each other. But the idea is to create this conversation moments between these two passersby. So, and then of course the rhythm of the walking, and you start becoming familiar with how people walk. If it's faster, some people try to run, so it records these motions, and then you recognize the motion of people through this the movement on the inside. So this took a long time because it's a large-scale project and it's a permanent. So if it's a permanent installation, of course, it has to go through different types of improvements and this is the last project that I want to show. This is in Copenhagen, in Kotubed Square. This was done to commemorate the centennial of the Armenian genocide. And the ambassador and the mayor of Copenhagen asked my team basically to build something in the same vein of this imbuing meaning in physical. We came up with this basically, this idea of basically, it's this sculpture that collects empathy messages, and it opens up and closes according to how much empathy messages it receives. Again, it has this Twitter component to it. So it was right before the opening of this that I landed in Copenhagen, and so this was on the cover of the newspaper, and the main newspaper, and in Danish it says that Turkey, the country Turkey, is very upset of this sculpture. So the idea was to create this empathy, but of course it became this highly political thing, which is quite ironic. Obviously the intention was never to do that, but it did something good also. It created this conversation, and there was a debate in the parliament about recognition of genocide, so it created interesting repercussions because of this sculpture. So this is my favorite song. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's by David Byrne. It says, "How did I get here? How the hell I got here? Basically, what am I doing?" I wanted to become an astronaut, and this is not what I signed up for. But I think the title of this conference is very interesting about Rizomas. It's about finding these opportunities of these small nuggets of interesting ideas and develop them, rather than having this direct goal, which, like the song says, I didn't sign up to get this beautiful house, this beautiful wife. I don't know how I got here. So it's the same thing with every one of us, right? I mean, we never know how we got here, but we are here. But the point is to get every moment to create these interesting opportunities. And I hope the discussion of this interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary ties to this idea of finding these opportunities in different things that we do, in terms of developing these ideas further. So part of the things, and it's about methods, right? We're talking about methods, and that's what I do in the lab, in my lab. It is somehow related to what I do in my studio, but it's a bit different also because I do more research on this idea of responsive environments, not smart cities. It's a different take on smart cities. So it's more about human understanding technology in the environment from a very human perspective, about perception. It's about how we behave, but how we can use technology again in the environment. So this is a very complex slide. I don't expect you to understand everything of it, but this is a slide for a method. But this is an interesting quote that I wanted to show. It's by Buckminster Fuller. He says, to change an existing paradigm, you don't struggle to try and change the problematic model. You create a new model and then make the old one obsolete. So, I mean, this is easier said than done, but I think it's a nice way to think about interdisciplinary collaborations and design process. So, and this is a little book. Recently, we published this book. It's called Responsive Environments, an Interdisciplinary Manifesto on Design Technology and the Human Experience. So it's a book. It's written in a manifesto type. But why am I showing this? Because this is a very complex, obviously, technology, human experience, and the built environment is very nebulous and very different ways of thinking about it. But there are ways to, like different nuggets that we can think about. And what we call them in these three categories, the situations, the idea of embedded intelligence, the idea of glitches that come up with technologies, and technological resilience, and then the idea of experiences, the idea of hacking perception, and mediated interplay, tailored dynamics, and then interactions of augmented spatiality and adaptive change. So I'm going to show a little bit of what these mean, and hopefully it will all come together. So the embedded intelligence is the idea of, again, this idea of smart cities and integrated smartness on all scales. So in smart cities, sensing network and digital technologies are typically employed to optimize operations and improve the performance of urban systems. So its optimization is the most important. So to counter this technology-centered approach, we need alternative ways of better to integrate the different layers. So it's this idea of integrating these different layers, and the human layer being one of the most important. So this is another one of my colleagues, contributor in the book, says an intelligent city should enable projects that are truly transformative character due to their sensitivity to the context, their flexibility, and their resilience. Within this context, we're doing another project. It's an ongoing project. It's about the idea of future of mobility, but again, understanding from a very human perspective. This is with the University of Bergamo in Italy. This is a multi-year approach for a project. And we're looking at it in a very multidisciplinary approach. So the idea of data-driven versus human-centered, temporal and spatial. So again, bringing engineers and designers to come up with, to think about all these issues, but not thinking about the human experience as a byproduct of technology. That's the most important thing at the end. So, and of course, it goes into interscalar approach, individual scale, urban scale, infrastructural scale. These are some studies. You see the So the other concept is the idea of urban glitch. So it's basically on embracing mistakes and unexpected errors on the urban, on the spatial level, basically. The urban glitch is an unexpected slippage of system function in a technologically driven environment, urban environment. It disrupts functionality and effectiveness of city dynamics. The urban glitch encourages designers to imagine and develop responsive artifacts, buildings, and environments that foster creativity, open up spaces otherwise unexplored, and lead to transformations throughout the whole city. So, this is one of my good friends and paid colleague, Edith Ackerman, she says, glitches intentionally tweak the affordances of the technology in order to generate outcomes that surprise. So that's a very important point, to idea to create moments that with technology and this is some of the I explore some of this within with the installations that surprise us basically in a delightful way. This is one example. This is another project by a student where street lamps basically fly with you and accompany you to in a rural setting with a drone. So basically, it just becomes like this twinkle. It's called twinkle. So it follows you in a rural environment to lead your way. It has a nice video, but it's not playing. But there are many. We can think of this again. This city. Technology integration in cities in a very poetic way. So this intersection between functionality and poetry, and that's the most important part of this idea of urban village. And one of the main focuses is this idea of hacking perception, is how we see and how we understand what we're seeing. So this is the idea of addressing the experiential aspects of urban living and how we perceive and interact with our surrounding to better inform and design responsive environments. As we try to understand the intimate relationship between the brain and the environment, we embrace opportunities of emerging technologies to reveal and quantify hidden facets of urban context. So this is very much based, it started with Kevin Lynch's ideas of imageability, basically, how he defines each place has like five, he defined them with 5 points, basically the path, edge, district, node, landmark. The idea is that we see cities in specific ways in these studies. So we're kind of continuing in the same tradition but using technology. So in this case, this shows the breadth of it. Students create these devices, some off the shelf, some made in the lab, to really see the environment and understand how they see the environment in different ways. Okay, so this project looks at eye tracking in the built environment. So basically, we had students wear eye trackers and looking at where they're looking while they're going in a journey, basically. And then the questions were what they saw. But of course, it's very interesting. This is an interesting question because we know what they looked at, but it's not necessarily what they saw. Because it's, I might be looking at you and I'm thinking about you, I'm thinking about the next slide. So that's not a way of thinking about, so it opens up questions, more questions than answers, but there are all sorts of technologies like this that we're trying to use to understand how we perceive the environment. So the other video that didn't play was about looking at city with colors, basically looking at if colors have emotional response in the environment, basically, and looking at combining looking at colors with EEG devices. And this is one of the later ones that students are working on. It's again, doing the same type of study, but in this case, using emotional understanding what kind of emotions generate these images, and creating a AI model that is trained collecting EEG data when observing various environments in different emotional states. So basically, what it's doing is like when I'm looking at this, it's creating a certain emotion that's comparing to other types of images that create the same emotion, and then it's bringing up in front of you what kind of image you're really seeing, and you always have the comparison between what you are really seeing and what your mind is seeing. So that's again, it's a very playful of looking at the mind's eye versus your real eye. And the whole point of it is, again, making you mindful of this, of the moments, basically, and how we can become, appreciate the moment, basically, that we're looking at. Another study, so these are the studies that we do in the lab. We don't have a necessarily clear outcome. They're pure studies, so we experiment with certain things and we publish papers and we see, okay, this might be interesting to work further on or bring other researchers. So in this case, looking at the idea of stress and proxemics, of how close we get to other people, and it became very clear. This was right before COVID, but during COVID it became such a big deal in proxemics. But if there are other architectural spaces that can create that kind of consistent emotional ideas, basically, that can bring in terms of using, again, the idea of proxemics with emotional state. And in this case, what's happening is there's the EEG device, again, looking at the stress levels and using different ways of transportation, walking, subway, cycling, driving, and seeing how they compare within a different taxonomy of spatial settings. So here it shows these different So again, there's a big taxonomy, and again, you can understand a certain way of looking at different environments, different sections of spaces, by using these new technologies, new biometric sensing technologies, which, I mean, it's becoming more and more popular to really quantify and really understand the way we understand the environment. So it's almost like evidence-based design, and it's really trying to, again, quantify design experiences that we, as architects, we do them by intuition, by tradition, but maybe there are certain scientific ways of understanding this. So this research is going in that direction. So the last one is, we did a similar type of study at the airport. The airport is a very interesting place where stress levels are very high. And in this case, we're using almost like a lie detector to look at stress levels. It's an EDA compared with the heart rate and in these different settings to really understand if there are opportunities of improving these different. So it can go from very the poetic to the very pragmatic, also this study. So again, finally coming up with Rizomas. So all this work has no, it's pure research. It has no direct end goal. And it's all about finding these opportunities again to nurture that come from these different points. And within this, again, very nebulous responsive environments area, there are ways of really carving these different sub-methods of how we can approach this and make sense of it. So at the end, I'm not an astronaut, I didn't become one, but I feel fine, that's okay. And thank you.
Muchas gracias, Arem, por esta interesante exposición. Invitar a Isabel Ramos, ella es psicóloga educacional y directora de desarrollo público facultario y docente de la Universidad de Bogotá, quien tendrá un diálogo con Sayegh. Si alguien no ha retirado, bueno, va a ser en español, y si alguien requiere para las respuestas de alguien, estamos entregando equipo de traducción simultánea con la credencial o cédulas de día para que puedan tener una consecutividad en la conversación. Isabel, alguien, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, Daniel, por tu exposición muy interesante. Yo, bueno, no soy experta en la disciplina de las artes visuales, ni diseño ni arquitectura, pero sí tengo harto interés y cierta sensibilidad, porque lo estudié antes de ser psicóloga. Quizás debiera haber terminado, ahora viendo tu exposición, no había gustado. Y tengo un rol también en la universidad relevante, que tiene relación con la interdisciplina y fomentar la interdisciplina en la universidad a propósito de un desafío que tenemos como institución en nuestra planificación estratégica 2022-2026. Nos hemos propuesto profundizar y ampliar la formación interdisciplinaria en las distintas carreras de la universidad. Y eso tiene un desafío importante para el trabajo de los cuerpos académicos. Entonces, probablemente me va a salir un poquito más del tema específico, digamos, de tu experiencia y de tu proyecto, y quizás después dar un espacio para quienes quieran preguntar un poco más específicamente sobre eso. Pero una de mis preguntas tiene que ver un poco con cómo movilizar a los cuerpos académicos a trabajar de esta manera. Yo entiendo que tal vez las disciplinas de esta facultad, o que son más cercanas, digamos, al trabajo que tú realizas, probablemente es algo que es mucho más cercano, es más fluido, pero tenemos otras disciplinas en la universidad donde esa tarea es un desafío, donde no se visualizan eso. Entonces, una primera pregunta es cómo movilizar a esos cuerpos académicos. Y entiendo que efectivamente hay que cambiar las creencias acerca de cómo se aprende, o sea, acerca del propio método, ¿no? Poco esa es mi primera pregunta.
Is this working?
Hay que preguntar.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is an excellent question, and a very challenging one to answer, frankly. So the question, the way I understand it, is how to bring in interdisciplinary to become part of the culture. Is that's one of the way of understanding this, and I think the challenge. So, needless to say, interdisciplinary is a very, if it's done right, it's a very strong and an amazing way to collaborate, to come up with different ideas. But if it's done wrong, it could be problematic also, because the challenge is, okay, we know disciplines, like for a long time, for hundreds of years, we're doing the same type of thing, but suddenly when you want to do something, collaborate with other disciplines or become interdisciplinary, the issue that often comes is things become shallow, let's say, not rigorous, because we know how to go in depth in our disciplines, but how we can do interesting work with these different disciplines, how they're trained. So that's one issue. And for that, there are ways, right? I mean, how to take voices in different. So usually the most, there are some disciplines that are, by nature of them, the way they are heard is much clearer than other disciplines. So these take over, and when an idea is very new, it's very fragile. So how you can create an environment that becomes very that nurtures this. So that's one challenge. But the other bigger challenge, I think, is the way we're as academics or as students or were rewarded is in sciences by publishing papers without peer reviews, basically. So in architecture, you're either building or doing installations or doing things. So it's very clear that you need to have your peers. So how you can create a model to incentivize these professionals or teachers or professors to thrive in an interdisciplinary environment. So it needs to come on a systemic level, basically, more to get rewarded for interdisciplinary, rather than, because it's easy to go back, okay, I know how you do things, so I'm going to review you, and so it's very difficult to, so that is the challenge, is how we incentivize and there are ways to do that. But that is one of the, those are the two challenges, I would say. One is more in terms of how to create methods that are more, that enhance creativity rather than dilute it in terms of interdisciplinary. The other one is to create the right reward atmosphere for interdisciplinary work. And by the way, I really wanted to be a psychologist, not a astronaut, because
muchas gracias, gente. Otra pregunta importante para nosotros es entender cuáles son los beneficios de esta forma de trabajar para el aprendizaje de los estudiantes y en qué medida ellos también se ven desafiados a trabajar de esta manera. Como contexto, nuestro sistema escolar en general, ¿cierto?, no propende el desarrollo de la autonomía ni tampoco a la conexión entre las disciplinas, ¿cierto? Y eso persevera un poco también en instituciones de educación superior, salvo ciertas excepciones. Entonces, ¿en qué medida esta forma de trabajar o de enseñar, ¿cierto?, o de aprender desafía también a los estudiantes a involucrarse en un proceso que es distinto? ¿Y cuáles son los principales desafíos para ellos?
So the main challenges in terms of, I didn't quite understand the question, if you possible to repeat.
Sí.
Maybe the translator can repeat it, I don't know.
Ok. El trabajo interdisciplinario, entiendo, también genera que los estudiantes compartan con otros grupos de estudiantes, ¿no? O con otro tipo de docentes que vienen de otras disciplinas, de otros lenguajes. También les genera un desafío a ellos trabajar de esta manera, ¿no? Quizás lo estoy constatando como un desafío porque para nuestro sistema educativo sí es un desafío trabajar así, ¿no? En general, ¿cierto?, las disciplinas son bastante atomizadas, las clases también de los estudiantes, hay poca colaboración, salvo ciertas excepciones, como digo, quizás esta facultad es también una forma de trabajo que es mucho más natural para el aprendizaje de esta disciplina.
Yeah. So it comes back to my first comment. I think it's difficult. We always come back to what we know, and it's difficult to go into this new venture, right? I mean, it's very proven that what we know is right, and jumping to a new way of doing it always takes a. But I think the rewards, if it's done right, it's tremendous, because in the class that I'm teaching, the idea of circular economy, I don't know much about circular economy, but I know how to create projects and take a project from one to the end. There's a circular economy expert with me, and there's an engineer. So we all learn from together. And the idea is but then the students are creating these amazing new type of projects that they never thought that they would do. So they come in with certain ideas of what they do. They end up with completely different ideas. So that is the most precious part of it, I think, because for students, because they discover, it's a constant discovery, right? And then again, it's a beautiful metaphor, the conference name, is constantly discovering new things and finding new opportunities to nurture. So that's a really nice way of saying it, and I think students benefit a lot with this. It just needs the right, and also if you think about it, designers are always borrowing from other fields, right? I mean, we say it's constantly we're borrowing. There's no, and we thrive in this hybrid environments, right? I mean, this idea of, I know there is the way of building something, but when innovation happens, usually it's bringing from other disciplines and making that, appropriating it in the right way. So for all these reasons, I think it's a right. I mean, you're preaching to the. I mean, I'm sold with this basically, but I think it's the right way of doing it. Basically, that's the thing. I don't know if I answered your question, right? Yeah. Okay.
No sé si quiero dar espacio también a otras personas que quieran consultar, hacer preguntas, comentarios. No sé si alguien está viendo el chat para poder compartir con nosotros. Mientras tanto, quizás también algo que en particular como psicóloga y como acompañando también los procesos de aprendizaje, ¿cuál es el papel de las disposiciones más afectivas o de la inteligencia emocional en el aprendizaje interdisciplinario? ¿Cómo esa dimensión también es relevante en el trabajo de esta naturaleza?
So the question is how emotions are important in this. I'm, as I said, when I grow up, I want to be a psychologist. I can play one, but I think it is a very. I think as architects or designers, we have an understanding of these situations, of how environments make us feel, or what the Gaston Bachelard wrote in a very nice way in Poetics of Space, like how the roof is more rational and the basement is creepy because it's holding all these. So it has to do all with psychology, basically, how we relate to these spaces, but really understanding why we feel this way. I mean, it's somewhere between science and poetry, right? And that's where I think architecture thrives at best, when it becomes this play between science and poetry. I think that's when the best work is. So in that sense, I think really understanding the science behind it of psychology is very, very, very interesting. And also pushing it towards the art and the poetics, I think would be, it's a very beautiful combination. Yes?
Buenas tardes, gracias por la exposición. Yo quería...
Oh, they need to use the microphone.
No, que se pongan ahí en el podium, ahí de ahí hagan la pregunta. Es que lo que pasa es que no puede traducir.
Más adelante.
Pero haz la pregunta y yo la repito. Haz la pregunta y
Is this?
Ahí está, ese con ese.
Creo que me voy a quedar acá. Mi pregunta en realidad es bastante quizás concreta, pensando en que uno de los objetivos quizás de este seminario o digamos, del espacio de hoy específicamente, como lo planteaban Andrés y Nicolás al comienzo, es pensar en cuáles son las metodologías o métodos, opciones de métodos por los cuales podemos transitar para fomentar este trabajo interdisciplinario. Y entre los puntos que usted destacó, me llamó la atención el que hablaba de embedded intelligence, que usted nombraba la importancia de la sensibilidad al contexto, la resiliencia y la responsividad. En relación a ese aspecto específicamente y en su experiencia como docente, ¿cuáles son las formas que usted misma ha explorado para despertar ese interés, ese enfoque, esa sensibilidad en el trabajo con sus estudiantes?
Okay.
It's a very difficult question, but it is this idea. When I talk about this idea of glitches or unexpected playfulness, so you can think of embedding technology as a technical endeavor where it's creating efficiencies or making things work better. But you can also think of it as this mediator of playfulness or creating these unexpected results, basically. So that's it's creating these situations, I think, where the questions that you ask the students and the problematic and the setup becomes to not necessarily solve the first part, the technology part. It's but to create these solutions that are, let's say, more playful, more that affect our senses and our sensibility. So then the technology becomes a second layer. So if you want the right path, it's always creating the problem to solve, but then the technology, the embedded technology, becomes as a service to that. So that's why when I talked about smart cities and responsive environment, smart cities doesn't do that. It's the idea of creating efficiencies, and it's very much, of course, it's misunderstood also. I mean, what smart cities are, it's more about logistics, and it has nothing to do with spatial understanding. But if we really understand it in a more poetic way and really creating this more pleasant and playful environments using technology, I think it could be one way to drive it. I'm not saying it's the only way, but that's one way of, or solving problems that are more pressing, let's say, that are, I mean, the idea of circular economy that I'm doing has nothing to do with playfulness or it is a very clear thing, but there are some students chose to create art installations within their theme, or some are using very highly engineering approaches. So it's, again, it's always framed. It's like doing a good studio in architecture. It's when you have the right problem you frame the right problem, everything falls into place, because it's about also creating, as teachers, I never think, okay, this is, okay, you teach something, it's just you create this environment, and that's the most well-crafted environment for students to learn. So that needs to come from this idea of emotionally engaging them in the topic, and then the technology becomes a solution. That's very long answer to your question.
No sé si alguien de la mesa. Hola, yo tengo dos preguntas. La primera tiene que ver un poco con lo que está mencionando de las Smart Cities. Pensando que las Smart Cities partieron como una solución a la logística, ¿cierto?, de las ciudades respecto a seguridad y otras cosas más, ¿cierto?, que han sido desarrolladas. Hoy en día las Smart Cities también están muy vinculadas a la sustentabilidad, que tienen que ver con parte de esa logística también de relaciones. Entonces, yo creo, no sé cuál es tu opinión, pero yo creo que ese estigma, no solamente de la logística, de la operatividad dentro de la ciudad, de las Smart Cities, y de usar la tecnología en ese beneficio, hoy en día abunda. Yo creo que no es el mismo, no sé si compartes eso también, pero eso es uno. Y lo otro, me gustó mucho el trabajo que hiciste con la presentación de Kevin Lynch. Creo que es como cuando uno lo trata de explicar a los estudiantes qué significa cuando va como en una calle estrecha o cuando llegas a una curva, a lo inesperado. Me parece muy interesante y quería saber técnicamente qué significó eso. ¿Con cuánta gente trabajaste desde la Transdisciplina? Eso, gracias.
Okay. To answer the first question, I agree with you. I'm being a bit extreme when I say just logistics. It has smart cities are more than that. But instead of the way I would think about it, instead of designing smart cities, we need to design cities that make us smarter, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's not we don't want cities that become smart and make us dumb, right? I mean, so that aura sphere that I showed you is about sustainability, but it's about our behavior, like how we can change our behavior. It's one way of doing it. I'm not being too critical about smart cities, but it's just another approach for that. So when smart cities are done right, it's perfect, obviously. Regarding the other question of how to... So yeah, this is an open-ended about the idea of perception in the environment. It's a big question, right, for architects and designers, and like how we define, how we understand, how we quantify. So more and more, all these new technologies that I showed are proving to be very useful to really understand and open up new ways of understanding these questions. So the way we approach these problems is to come up with we look at technologies, what is available, what we can measure, and how we can build on previous knowledge, right? I mean, so if you think about the eye tracking, so maybe Kevin Lynch would have used something like that, right? I mean, to see, okay, what people looked at versus what they remembered, and so it's yet another tool in the same knowledge that's being built. Same thing with the EEG, the emotion, adding emotion to that. I think it opens up huge possibilities, right? I mean, how we feel about these different spaces in a really, whether we're aware of it or unaware of it. So, and we're just scratching the surface because there's no, I mean, there are many ways of new ways of doing this. And as I said, it's a very interdisciplinary research, and it's pure research. So we don't know what comes out. So maybe sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's completely not. And that's what research is. That's why research is valuable also, right? Unlike something that you repeat over and over that you know how to do. So we don't know these things when we go into them.
Hola, bueno, muchas gracias por la presentación también. Mi pregunta es bien sencilla y tiene que ver con cuán importante es la reacción de las personas que observan tu trabajo cuando está montado.
Lo pregunto porque cuando se trabaja como en laboratorio, generalmente en diseño, en arte o en arquitectura, uno trabaja como esperando un algo que tal vez no va a ocurrir nunca, ¿cierto? Pero de repente cuando las cosas están montadas, como que la obra cobra un nuevo significado, digamos. ¿Cuán importante en tu trabajo es esa parte, eso que estás esperando? Esa es mi primera pregunta. Y la segunda es sobre tu cita de David Byrne. ¿Cómo llegaste hasta aquí? Gracias.
So can you repeat the last part? What was it?
La última pregunta, la segunda.
¿Sí puedes repetirlo?
Sí, la segunda pregunta es un poco por tu cita a David Byrne. En el fondo, preguntarte, how did you get there?
Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I didn't hear that part. But yeah, so the first part, the reaction of course, we're designing for people, and the reaction of people is very important, right? I mean, it's when we're doing these installations. I mean, in the last example that I showed, where the whole country got upset about this culture, that's a huge reaction that I wasn't expecting, and but it creates something, right? You know, the cloud one, where people came, started doing yoga under it to calm the cloud down, which it's trying to create this feedback loop, which is completely not expected. So all these things are very, very interesting, how it's reacted to, how it's used, and I mean, it's because each project is a kind of an experiment by itself, so we never know how things are going to be used until they use them, and you have a certain idea, and so you make the best of it. So there's no, but to answer your question clearly, that it's very it's very important, basically, for me to really understand what the reaction of people are. So that's and I design for that, right? I mean, that's what it's designed for. And yeah, so in terms of my favorite song, David Byrne, How Did I Get Here? I have no idea. I don't think anybody has any idea where you end up, right? I mean, it's just you do. But I guess what I was saying, it's very important to come up with, use every moment as an opportunity, right? I mean, rather than, because we're in this, I mean, the theme of the song is that we're in this automatic pilot, right? I mean, we just go, we do the next thing, we do the next thing, we do the next thing. But maybe that's a good thing, right? It doesn't need to be a bad thing. So you can just, all these things, you can create these little nuggets of, and it's not what I do is, like, I studied architecture because I couldn't become an astronaut, because that's what my parents told me I need to do. And then I was playing video games a lot, so I started designing video games. So I left architecture, and then I said, "Oh, I like architecture. I need to go back to architecture." So it's like completely random. But then I started, okay, bringing this technology and interaction that I played with video games maybe into the physical environments. So you can weave in things that from your experience, and that's how I got here. I don't know. Yeah.
Bueno, muchas gracias por tu presentación muy inspiradora. Yo tenía una pregunta para relacionar un poco tu trabajo con la sesión de hoy de Método. Y en ese sentido, quería preguntarte cómo el tipo de aproximación que ustedes usan, tanto en la oficina como en tu experiencia más académica, se refiere a un método no lineal que sí logra resultados y que se separa un poco de la aproximación más tradicional de un método lineal. O sea, la diferencia entre, disculpen la precisión en inglés, pero que no sé la mejor traducción, pero la diferencia entre
el top-down approach y el bottom-up approach. Y esa diferencia, cómo se refleja en tu trabajo y cómo es un aporte al desarrollo de tus proyectos.
Yeah, it is a very interesting question. I think there is no it's not only top down or bottom up, right? I mean, it's constantly going back and forth, right? There's no like. And it's especially because these projects are mostly research-based projects, so it's not that, okay, in one case we come up with a narrative, okay, this is what we kind of wanted, and then we play with technology, does this technology work with that or not? And then maybe the technology takes over, and then we come back and then look at the narrative. So these are, it's fairly flexible in terms of being top-down and bottom-up, but at any given point, and this is again part of what makes interdisciplinary type collaborations stronger or more diluted. Each discipline or methodology needs to really go in depth, really make things work, the AI is going to work, and so that gets developed, but then you always check it back. So it's in that sense, it's very similar to a good design process, basically, that method. But in this case, we're using these different ingredients, right? I mean, and the idea is also not to be afraid of trying, right? But this also goes back on what kind of incentives we have, right? If we have if we're going to be rewarded on publishing the same type of thing, then we'll not be able to play with this, right? So, I mean, I don't know if I answered your question. It's kind of maybe I didn't answer your question, but I didn't quite understand your question. I don't know.
Bien, bueno.
Maybe you can elaborate.
Bueno, muchas gracias también por la presentación. Quería hacerte una consulta respecto a algo que muchas veces pasa en procesos experimentales, sobre todo cuando se desarrollan con un grupo de estudiantes, ¿no? ¿Cómo ha sido tu experiencia en un trabajo más de contención, ya que te interesa la psicología? ¿Cómo como equipo académico, docente, van acompañando a los estudiantes para manejar, por ejemplo, la frustración, que significa la exploración, ¿no? El descubrimiento, que no es fácil, los errores que son continuos en estos procesos requieren una especie de hombro constante, ¿no? ¿Cómo ha sido tu experiencia en aquello, sobre todo por los resultados que tú muestras, ¿no? Que son tangibles, que son complejos y que seguramente para llegar a ello se cayeron 300 veces antes de llegar a un resultado posible, ¿no? ¿Cómo ha sido tu experiencia?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy process by any means, right? It's like each time you do one, you say, I'm not going to do it again, and then you do it again, right? It's like that. But each time you learn something new also, and but that's what also encourages me to do things, because it's at the end of the day, each project is a learning process, right? So if I'm not learning something new, I don't like to do it completely. That's why I don't do the same thing over and over. And if you're learning something new by doing, you're going, no matter what, you're going to fail, right? I mean, it's not. In terms of frustration, maybe I'm very patient. I surround myself with patient people, but I don't have a magic pill for that. I don't know, but it can get frustrating. Yes, absolutely. But when you see that at the end, the reward, I think, hopefully, my female friends say it's like a childbirth, right? That you say you're never going to do it again, and then you forget. But that's how it is.
¿Estamos? ¿Sí? Muchas gracias a por compartir con nosotros aprender nuestras inquietudes y compartir nuestras reflexiones.
Thank you so much.
De receso para luego continuar con nuestros expositores, con Carolina Pino, Ricardo Román, Benedita Ursúa y Carlos Medellín. Tenemos un receso de 10-15 minutos y volvemos nuevamente a nuestro panel de expertos. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, debería.